fifth grade. Really ain't no difference if that nigga gay.
Blood satellite.
Oh, this thing. Okay. I want you to pick a search engine. Actually, no, just type in noretreatmovement.com. So this is a Canadian movement that came across my desk when I was on Telegram.
Oh, I heard about this the other day.
Yeah. I think I might have mentioned. I think I sent you an image of this guy because he was just being a kind of a kooky guy. So this website, it outlines what the No Retreat movement is, sort of the manifesto and all the rules. And I saw this guy, he was on a few Canadian channels, recording videos of himself out in the public, doing these things that he does and spreading the word. And then, so I'll tell you how I came across this first. So there's a video that he had did, and I'll describe it for you. So he's sitting at a table, and he's got maybe 7 to 10 cell phones in front of him. I assume these are his burner phones or they're broken. Whatever, he's got a bunch of bullshit cell phones in front of him, and he's dressed in urban camo, right? So that would be the gray and the black camo. He's got a bunch of patches that he put on himself, which, by the way, is what you're supposed to do. And we'll get to that in a second. He's got one of those beards where it's just on the chin. It's like an Amish beard.
Yeah.
And
it's just it's below the chin line. Like he's got a full neck beard, but nothing on the jaw. It's all below the neckline, like the jawline. It's crazy.
Yeah. And here's a quote from him just from the website at the bottom. It says, quote, "Police and military are our friends, but we don't trust the feds." So I don't know. That's kind of funny to me. That's like you're trying to play both sides here. But anyway, so this was him on the video. And he was talking about how he had just been released from involuntary detainment in a mental health facility. So he's saying this because he wants us to believe that he was held against his will for his political beliefs, but he was just in a psych ward, and he was maybe because he had some mental breakdown. And it was a ceremony he was hosting where he was going to cut off his wrist things, because when you're in a hospital, you get one of those paper wristmen. So he cut one off. He had these little tiny scissors. He cut one off, and then he threw it away with grandiosity, and he couldn't cut the other one off. And he was kind of going with it for a while. Then he gives up and says, "That'll come off later."
So this is coming off right now, and this is coming off right. This will come off a little later. Anyway.
And I watched that, and I just wrote LOL. Because I'm like, this is something you would get from The Office. It seems like a joke. I'm like, okay, is he doing a bit? Like this would be something like you would see on Cinema at the Cinema or whatever. Like this is fun. Okay. It's very dry humor, but I think he takes it very seriously and didn't realize why people might laugh at that. And so you're looking at this right now, and maybe we can go. I'll click on About the Founder. Let's figure out who this guy is. His name's Senji. All right, so I'm going to start with a little paragraph about him, about his background. So Senji was born in Moscow, Russia, and came to Canada when he was 2 years old. And by the way, there's no period. There's one period in here, and everything else is commas. It's one big run-on sentence.
He's illiterate, yeah.
Yeah. When he was 2 years old, he swore allegiance to the Canadian Federation in grade school and has zero tolerance for dictatorships, a true-born oppositioner. In 2018, he was informed about the New World Order and also shortly became Christian. The way that's described is kind of funny because,
I love becoming Christian shortly. That's great. That's fantastic.
Like he just learned about it and then had to go get baptized. Shit! Like he saw Alex Jones once and immediately went to look for a priest.
I also imagine in 2018 he was informed about the NWO. Like he's sitting at his desk and his secretary comes in and whispers in his ear and he says, "Oh my God."
Yeah, he said like you're just informed about like, oh man, there's rain coming. It's gonna be an early winter. Shit. All right, so continue. Sorry.
He really does have unlimited drive and belief in himself and his Lord. The No Retreat movement was supposed to be decentralized, but it is currently de facto centralized until more people find out about it and declare themselves as general as well. Senji will not stop until all 40 million Canadians have heard about the No Retreat in some capacity.
Yeah. So, okay, just a couple of things off the top here. So he is founder, and the idea here is that anyone can become a general. of your area. So if you guys sit, and there's rules about this on the manifesto. So you could be a general in Saskatoon, you could be a general in Alberta, whatever it is, but it's supposed to be decentralized. However, he has elected himself not only as the founder, but also like the head of HR. And we'll get into that in a second. So he still has a thing. And then on his little infographic here about him, it says why Senji should be leader of the Canadian opposition. So it's like you still want to be leader. And like looking at this from just with fresh eyes, I'm like, there's never going to be a situation where you don't call yourself the leader. Here's one reason that he brandishes his face everywhere as often as possible. And here's a drawing of him. He did like he hired someone from DeviantArt to draw him an artist representation in his army camo and everything. And he's got kind of a wry smile on, and he's smoking. I think he's smoking a joint.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm looking at here. Okay. So let's go through why Senji should be leader of the Canadian opposition. So number one, founded the No Retreat decentralized ideological movement. It's not really ideological at all. We'll get into that in a second. Confronted Jagmeet Singh on Bank of Canada fraud. I assume it says there's a video of that somewhere. We'll have to look into that. Expert in info, psych, and spiritual warfare. Orange Revolutioner, not an activist. I'll have to look that up. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, where's one post? You're looking at this?
Yeah, I'm watching. I'm already reading. This is fantastic.
Basically a monk, deeply Christian, almost elder status.
Hey, he just described to us how he became a Christian in 2018 after he learned about the NWO. But
He
no,
just
guys,
became a Christian 5 minutes ago, and like, yeah, I'm basically a monk.
yeah, man, I was raised in the Baptist church, and I never even came close to almost elder status. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a Jesus if you think about it, and I did this like 3 years ago. Like right away. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to bully what is most likely a mentally unwell man.
Yeah.
But I need to go through. We're not done. Not even close to being done. Okay. Only one that had political cartoons made and put out in Halifax. I mean, that's a claim. So there's...
And that's so ambiguous. Do you mean that people made cartoons about you, or you made cartoons and made them and then put out in Halifax? Do you mean in a public paper or on the internet while you were living there?
This claim sounds like there was no such thing as a political cartoon in Halifax.
Ever.
And Halifax is a city.
Yeah,
it's not
large.
a small town. And if it was a small town, that would not be noteworthy. If you did the first political cartoon in your town of 1,000 people,
yeah,
that's I don't care.
I think we can probably give them a little bit of each. On the one hand, it's not really noteworthy at all because it's not that big a place, and on the other hand, that's probably false.
Yeah, that's I love these lies. These are my favorite lies. First of all, it's obviously a lie. Second, if it was true, that would be worse. Just, I love it. Okay, so there's a bunch to cover here. I didn't intend on this being as big as it is, but I'm chewing the fat on this one. Okay, so next one, can't be bribed. I'm TBD, I suppose.
Yeah.
Unlimited drive and belief in himself. He's a go-getter. Okay.
Yeah.
Not afraid of death or life in prison, and in brackets, all under God's providence. That almost makes it sound like he's not afraid of this if it is under God's providence, how he's opening the door to maybe he will be in prison in a method that's not under God's providence, and he would be against that.
Yeah, because otherwise, why would you put that modifier at the end? And remember, all of this is the reason why you should elect him the leader of the Canadian Opposition Party.
Yeah. He can't be bribed, and he's not afraid of life in jail as long as it's God's plan. If it's not, then he's against that.
Then shit. Oh man.
Imagine doing that in court and just be like, I can't. No, the jury is not part of God's plan. It's too many colors. I unironically think that could have been a defense if you go back in time far enough in like Lynchburg or something like.
Yeah, probably.
It's too many coloreds on the bench. Okay, Here's where we're going. Illegally detained for 72 hours under the Unconstitutional Mental Health Act, told to not participate in politics. And there's a video on the page. Okay, so just to break that one down, that would be if you had a doctor tell you specifically not to get involved in politics. That's very funny, because that means a doctor would not really have any opinion on that unless while in the psych ward you would not shut the fuck up about politics. And then he had to take off his white coat, take off his stethoscope, speak to you as just a man, just as a citizen of this planet, and say, please, I'm begging you, don't get into politics.
Stop.
Outside of medical, I'm not speaking as a doctor, I'm speaking as a man. Because a doctor wouldn't do that. That doctor would be like, yep, okay, sure, you're not sick, so get out. Because they hear this shit all the time.
What's up, guys? Feeling good? This is practice for the level 4.
And 72 hours in a mental health facility, that would be, you can involuntarily get committed, but the maximum, I believe, is 2 days. And that's if someone thinks you're a threat to yourself and others. Mm-hmm. Or if you threaten suicide. It's very often like if you threaten to kill yourself or harm others, they'll keep you there and you can't get out. And that's, and then from there, there's a point to be made that people have said that this could be used against people. I do get that. I do get why, if you can only get thrown in jail if you commit certain crimes. However, you can get thrown into a mental facility indefinitely, and they can just keep you there forever on Trump. If you wanted to create a political prisoner, that is one way you could do it. I don't think that's what happened here, because he was let out after 2 days. I think he just got thrown in for wanting to kill himself or something. Mm-hmm. And then came up with this while there. Who knows? Next one. Bold enough to walk into a police station in full camo and military boots. I mean, my take is that that's probably one of the few places where they'll stand and applaud you if you walk in military uniform. Yeah, they assume you're a soldier. They assume you might be a veteran or a currently enlisted member.
Have you seen pictures of him though? Because he's got like the winter camo with huge communist stars and the big pompadour hat or whatever it is with the frills on and everything. No, he looks like he's cosplaying. So
he does. There's a mix of like Soviet imagery on this that I don't really understand. I think what might have happened is he went to a military surplus store, because you can go to any military surplus store in Ontario, and I've been to a few, and just buy patches. Yeah. Which is what he recommends you do as well. Okay. So, fluent in Russian and can speak French. Sure. Okay. Here's one I love. Subconsciously tries to take over any protest or movement he's in. Real leadership qualities. You just say I'm just subversive without even trying. I'm like, no, that's actually not a leadership quality. A leadership quality is that you can lead men and gather them around you, not that you go into a movement and subvert it and try in a Machiavellian sense take it over. That makes you a fucking snake.
It is sad that he thinks that's what leadership is.
I go into every movement, and then I'd become leader, and then of course a lot of people leave. I'm like, no, so you destroy movements, and that's on your resume you've produced here.
And this is another case where if it were true, it would make you a piece of shit. Also, it's definitely not true.
First of all, this is a lie. Second of all, if it was true, it'd be so much worse. Okay. And the next one is, I wish you had put a bit more work into this next one. Expert in the occult.
Yeah, come on, man.
That's a big one. That's a big swing on there.
Yeah.
Okay. Never reads a script. Talks naturally with no preparation. I've seen you talk. You should use a script.
Yeah, you should get a script.
Expert in fitness. I mean, I don't trust most people who say they're experts in fitness. If you spent any time in fitness forums, like in bodybuilding forums, everyone, you're an expert in fitness.
Of course,
if
he looked in real life like the little cartoon, the DeviantArt cartoon of him, you could say he's moderately fit. If you look at the photos of him in real life, he's got cheeseburger body. I don't know. Like he's maybe not obese, but he looks like he's hung by threads. He looks, I don't know, chips and dip.
Oh, so I took a detour here to look at, these would be his political cartoons, I believe. So if you look on the noretreatmovement.com, there's posters to print out and post. And then he's got a selection here. There's so many images of him smoking a joint. I don't know why he's doing this. It's like, that's bad optics, and also you just seem like a Joe Rogan guy now.
Didn't he also say like he's okay? So it's got in the bottom left, it's got him smoking a joint, and then in the center it says we discourage using any recreational drugs, including getting drunk. But
Yeah,
like
what the
the poster has you smoking a joint. I don't get it.
I don't get it. And
Maybe
so I'm just
maybe is it? Look, this guy is insane. Is it possible that that's what he thinks a cigar looks like?
maybe. And then he'd be going for Castro imagery, which is once again anti what, because he's like anti-communist. He was one of those guys who'd say, yeah, I'm anti-fascist and anti-communist, one of those guys. But there's so much Soviet imagery.
Yeah.
So here's a political cartoon that it looks like so maybe he drew all of this. Maybe he's actually an artsy guy. Sure. Okay. Here's a political cartoon about Premier Tim Houston. And this guy, this premier, who's being lampooned, he's wearing a gold necklace with an award he just received that says useful ignoramus scapegoat. And who would want an award like that? Why would a guy wear that around?
He seems pretty happy about it, though. I'm not going to judge.
He doesn't seem to realize that he's a useful ignoramus scapegoat.
Well, you could. He is saying though in the speech bubble, I'm too mentally compartmentalized to believe in the new world order, and I'm disconnected from the reality of the housing crisis. That is right on point. That is cutting. I got shivers reading that.
This is so much worse than like, what's that guy who does the Trump ones? You know the guy I'm talking about, like the guy who's famous for this shit. Wow, what's his fucking name?
Ben Garrison.
Yeah, Ben Garrison. Like this is so much worse than because Ben Garrison will like label everything. This is like
Ben Garrison's dumb in the context. Look, with Ben Garrison, he's just doing what like paper political cartoons have been doing for 100 years. Which is shit, but they're all shit. I mean, it's funny that people mock him for the way that he's doing those cartoons, but like, look at any fucking newspaper, look at the political cartoons, that's what they do. So, I don't know. It's still stupid, but it's not like he invented it.
And also the cartoon has the guy's name next to it, Premier Tim Houston, because the idea was if it's a cartoon, you should be able to look at him and see the caricature. So I would like to take a lot of these political cartoons and redo them where it's just a tiny paragraph. Remove all imagery and just white box with a paragraph in the middle that says, Premier Tim Houston is a useful ignoramus and a scapegoat. He is too mentally compartmentalized to believe in the New World Order and is disconnected from the reality of the housing crisis.
Boom.
You might as well just have that.
Bold 25-point Arial, get out a full page ad, second, third page of the Sun. That would actually be more effective than this fucking thing.
Yeah, because at least Ben Garrison, he's trying to be clever about it. I can see the machine at work, and he's not like Stone Toss is the king of this because his comics, you can remove all the writing from them and they would still work. Yeah. So this is the complete opposite of that, where if you remove all the text from this, it's just a white guy with gray hair wearing a nice award.
Yeah.
Like that's all it is. So that's the rule of political cartoons. Can you remove all the words from this and you still get the gist of what is being done? And this is the polar opposite of that. And I just like that. And I want to do that to more political cartoons. That would be like a Garfield edit. Just have the words and put that on a shirt. And that's what we're engaged in, really. These are bad. Okay, so I'm just looking at we'll get past this soon, but I just wanted to say what on the manifesto he's got here. So there's three things put at the top. And first of all, this manifesto seems to concern itself a lot with imprisonment. For a very brief manifesto, like a one-pager. So we got oppositioner means citizen opposing the government. A corruptioner, a corrupt government official. Sure. Gaslighting, deliberate attempt to make someone think they're crazy. So that's right at the top of things we need to know
Yeah.
from this man's perspective. So it's a decentralized ideological movement, also not ideological. He's an ASA general, which means ASA means arrogantly self-appointed, which I think is kind of funny, actually. That's the only part I really like about this.
Yeah.
All right, so just brief ideology overview here. So our ideology, all government officials should be patriots. Sure. Lobbying politicians should be abolished. Yeah, I would agree. Political parties should be abolished. Daring, but arguments can be made. That's what you would also see in a fascist or a communist government, in an authoritarian regime. You would have people, it's just one party. It's a one-party system, and you could have people move in and be elected, but you don't vote for other parties. But then just 1 or 2 points down, it says campaigns should be federally funded. So what campaigns if there's no parties? You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't. What does that mean? Government officials and their proxies should never be allowed to attend secret meetings such as Bilderberg. Fair, I guess. Bank of Canada should be reinstated back to its original mandated purposes. Now that's funny, because if he was taking an anti-central bank thing, okay, but he's just like, no, I like the central banks. Just make it how it used to be. I think it was always bad. Like, if you're against central banks, you must know that since day one, they've been like this. There was never a turning point where they became bad.
I mean, with so much of this, it just says more about him and his mental state and his level of education than it does about anything else. Where, like, yeah, even the comment about this being told about the NWO in 2018, like, you really heard about that for how old are you, in your 30s? And the first time you heard the phrase New World Order was 3 fucking years ago. Jesus Christ, bro.
Was probably from the news.
Yeah,
they're just talking about it now.
Yeah, you heard it on CTV. Jesus.
So yeah, okay. So Canada needs German-level prisons. The incarcerated still require dignity. This seems to be pulled directly from his experience.
Yeah.
Citizen commissions in the form of roundtables for active citizens. I mean, stuff like this just introduces, okay, what is an active citizen? What do you mean a round table? Because that sounds like a town hall, which we have. We have that now. You can do that now. No one goes to these in your town or your city. They're right. I bet you today, or like multiple times during the week, there's going to be things where the city is like, we're building a new park. Anyone can come down and talk to us about it, and no one goes.
No, people do go. Actually, they're totally fucking cancerous. They're even worse than democracy on the whole. They make democracy worse than it otherwise is, and it's bad to begin with. Because the only people that go are insane spinsters that have nothing better to do with their time and just want to fuck with other people's lives. So yeah,
and you can find videos of this everywhere. And it's like, oh, look at this person at a city council meeting who lose their mind. I'm like, no, every single city council meeting, someone's losing their mind. There's a cat lady. There's someone on government assistance who's got a vendetta against someone in their neighborhood. That's all you get. Yep. So I mean, you can't do that if that doesn't work.
The rest of us are at work. So
oh, and here's one. Seniors and military need to be referred, I think you spelled referred wrong, to sir and ma'am out of respect and taken care of financially by the government. So like, this is part of your manifesto. This sounds boomerish. Like, we used to call each other sir and ma'am and get all this saggy pants, and like, this is just just neocon stuff. This would have been boring in 1999. Pat Buchanan would blow this guy's fucking mind. And then there's a lot of no minors allowed here, to the point where I'm thinking, if we had a problem with minors on this. And no, owning firearms or anything else is restricted. Anything else that is restricted, like batons and handcuffs, that's what's discouraged. I'm like, fuck, okay. Yeah, and here we go. Discouraged. Using any recreational drugs, including getting drunk, while you have a fucking spliff in your mouth in all of your promotional imagery. So I didn't want to spend so long on that, but this just, again, came across my desk, and I saw this guy, and he was just spamming all these chat rooms with this stuff. And I don't really know what this is about, because like if it's decentralized and like it seems radical, but your radical movement is just saying that you're against lobbying, and you're again like people should love their country more. Like that's not very
Yeah.
radical. Like you are, that sounds like something a conservative would say.
But it's also not decentralized because it's got you as its head. And I guess there's an assumption that if a lot of people start rallying behind you, you would go and change these rules or give them directions or et cetera, right? Which is to say, if they'd put you back in the mental institution where you belong and took your phone away, then the movement would fall apart. So it's a highly centralized movement.
Okay. Okay. So here's something. Special entitlements for the founder. This will be the last thing. This, I promise. All right. So Senji can lose his general status at any time, like any other general, but his status as the only chaplain in a non-religious movement is permanent and cannot be removed. He also gets the permanent status as HR manager. Okay. That position does not grant him any power, sure. It just is as a complaint line for troops if they feel something is wrong and the problem isn't being fixed locally. So, like a leader. You would go, okay. Senji will have a special exemption on his uniform that will allow him to wear up to 3 Bible passages and a cross patch on his uniform. Now, when he says wearing 3 Bible patches, I'm imagining him ripping it from the Bible and actually pinning it to like Warhammer 40K shit. Now, if anyone else has religious patches, that is not a tenet violation. It would just be considered rude, especially since Senji considers himself as a real chaplain and not a general. So I'm not going to get in trouble. It's just that would be very rude if you also wore Bible patches.
a real chaplain and not ASA. So he recognizes and he makes this joke about if you call yourself a general, you're an arrogantly self-appointed general. But he considers himself a real chaplain, not arrogantly self-appointed. Okay, so in what context are you a real chaplain? Is it because you're almost a monk, like you're practically elder level? Like, is this?
Yeah, I got New World Order baptized, and I'm basically like Jesus.
Also, I'm practically a monk, but I know a lot about the occult.
Yeah, what the fuck? Like, okay, we've already got Jay Dyer. We already have the guy who knows the most about the Christianity and knows the most about the occult. There's not room for 2.
I really want to find the Mr. Sub where this guy works on the weekdays and go in and like take a really long time ordering a sandwich. I think it'd be really fun. We should take a trip to Nova Scotia.
Unlimited drive and belief in himself. I mean, that could also just another word for that would be narcissist.
Yep.
Another word for that would be an insane narcissist. So, because I had one other thing I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of a rambling point, because I read this book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, and this is sort of an epilogue to the arc we had about the CIA. We did a couple episodes delving deep into the CIA, the history of the CIA, things they had done. And this is more about this book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. It's the history of Laurel Canyon and history of all the musicians that were there. And you might find this very interesting because I know you're big into more like classic rock, mainly through like your dad, but you would know a lot of these names. Hold on, let me get the book. So Laurel Canyon, I'll just read a brief description of what this is about. So Laurel Canyon in the 60s and early 70s was a magical place where a dizzying array of musical artists congregated to create much of the music that provided the soundtrack to those turbulent times. Members of bands like the Byrds, the Doors, Buffalo Springfield, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, the Eagles, Frank Zappa, Steppenwolf, and a bunch of others, and Joni Mitchell and others lived together and jammed together in the bucolic community nestled in the Hollywood Hills. So this was a real place, and this is where some of the biggest rock bands of the time just happened to spend all their time and jam together. And there was drugs, there was acid, there were Mama Cass and Frank Zappa were seen as sort of these elder figures there. And for younger people, if you don't know these bands, you should, because these are known bands. And if you like classic rock, you'll know these, like Steppenwolf, you'll know them. But it was interesting because this was, Hollywood wasn't far, but they made a point where at this time, Hollywood was not known as a musical destination. So if you wanted to become a famous musician, you would go to like Nashville, you might even go to New York, but like going to Hollywood wasn't seen as a place musicians went to. But this place like sprung up out of nowhere, and all these weird hippies started showing up, and it's got deep connections to Charles Manson. That's why a lot of people bring this up. So not only was it home to all these musicians, it was also, you would have Jack Nicholson coming through there, all these younger actors around that time who were also big into weird sex and acid and that hippie lifestyle, that degenerate lifestyle. And so it was one of the points made by the book. There's 2 points. The one that got me reading it was the connections of the CIA to this musical scene. So, hold on a second. One interesting thing about that area is you can look this up. There's this place called Lookout Mountain Laboratory. So Lookout Mountain Laboratory was a CIA-funded movie studio in the Laurel Canyon area that's said to have directed up to 19,000 films. And it was an operation at this time. I think it stopped being an operation not that long ago, but it was open, and people would say, yeah, we know that there's a fucking government run like CIA movie studio here. And it was known that a lot of famous directors toured there. Like they had these famous actors and tours, and there's photos of them taking tours of it. So the story goes that they weren't just filming government stuff there, because you like, oh yeah, they're filming, test footage for maybe a type of gun or something. It's like, well, also like 19,000 films, most likely they were producing some sort of propaganda. And the idea behind this book was, what role did the CIA play in this entire music scene? Because there's rumors of all of these musicians having deep CIA connections, and the book mentions them. So, for example, Frank Zappa and Jim Morrison both had like deep military ties through their fathers. Now, and people's managers in Laurel Canyon, like a lot of their managers had deep military ties or were direct military personnel. And this guy named Papa Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas with Mama Cass, like he had connections to various global revolutions, and he was known to like disappear and pop up in Guatemala and pop up in somewhere in Northern Africa. It's like, wow, this guy led a really charmed life, and then he ended up in this Laurel Canyon with this band. And a lot of them had ties, and this wouldn't surprise anyone, to very wealthy, maybe even royal families. Now, this wouldn't surprise anyone knowing how hippies are, knowing how these young activists are. So if you're like a young guy and you're like, where do these guys get their money? Well, they come from rich parents. That happens these days. So the argument was it happened back then. A lot of these young rock stars had rich, wealthy, connected parents, which I will I'll kind of argue against the book in one regard. So, and in the conspiracy theory that, look at all these people with military family. And like, if you look at the time this was happening in the 60s, odds are everyone had some military tie in their family. Because you're talking about, who would your parents have been? People who fought World War II when there was drafts? Like these days, if you have like millennials and a lot of Gen X people having kids, military ties might seem way rare. But there was a time where everyone would have had a military tie in some way in their family, because there was a fucking draft. And if you had like a father or a grandfather that wasn't in like military intelligence, or like had some kind of like a colonel or something, it's like, well, then they were either a conscientious objector and ran to Canada, or they were retarded and couldn't go to war. So to claim that, oh, they got military family, that doesn't hold a lot of water to me, considering the time it was. However, there's some cases where there were actual deep ties to the CIA, and the CIA took an interest in this stuff. Now, the claim that's made about the entire hippie movement, I'm more friendly to, because there's a claim that the CIA was building up the hippie movement because the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam movement, actually predates the hippies. So the anti-war movement and anti-CIA, maybe American imperialism, whatever you want to call it, that had its roots in academia. So that goes back a long time. So the claim is that the CIA was trying to build up the hippies to discredit the anti-war movement. And then there's claims from a lot of these academics where it's like, yeah, we woke up one day and all of a sudden it's about drugs and sex and hedonism and weird, like underage sex. Like all of a sudden these people showed up. Now there's different sides to that. We can say it happened organically because this sort of thing would attract those types of people. But I am friendlier to the idea that the CIA would try and funnel money and maybe platform these people to discredit a war that they were very interested in having, and for various different reasons. You can get into like, oh, CIA is doing drug running, CIA is doing this or that. Sure, there's a lot of things the CIA were doing. So this would benefit them, and it wouldn't be that hard to do. And the CIA, we know, had interest in popular culture. They had interest in movies. They still have interest in movies. They're still funding movies and video games that make the CIA look like cool good guys all the time, right?
Yeah.
So that is possible, sure. And one of the claims in the book is like, if these people are so anti-establishment, why didn't they talk about their parents? I'm like, yeah, maybe that's kind of a gray area. And really, when I talk about what this is an extension, hypothetically, of the MK Ultra program, because the MK Ultra program eventually got closed. But the MK Ultra program became the MK Search program. And this is something that the CIA and the government does all the time. They will rename programs so they could say plausibly to the press, like, oh, we closed that program down in the 60s. They just renamed it and moved to a different office. So the MK Search program, I'm just going to read what it was, because this all ties into this. So the subjects in MK Search were deemed expendables, people whose death or disappearance would arouse no suspicion. The experiments were designed to destabilize human personality by creating behavior disturbances, altered sex patterns, aberrant behavior using sensory deprivation and various powerful stress-producing chemicals, and mind-altering substances. Some of the experiments were carried out at the CIA safe houses in Washington, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Others were conducted by Dr. Maitland Baldwin, Maitland Baldwin at the National Institutes of Health. So, and we know this is something the government was interested in. They were experimenting with LSD. They're experimenting with any mind-altering stuff. With the stated purpose, and this isn't even that big of a conspiracy theory, the stated purpose of saying, like, can we switch people on and off? Is it possible to turn someone into a killer? Now, this would be popularized in movies like The Manchurian Candidate, but from their perspective, they're thinking, can we inflict so much mind-altering trauma to people to the point where if we have a certain phrase we say, they shut up, all their emotions go away, and they just turn into an assassin for us? Now, it might not be like programming a computer, but it's like trying to switch off emotions, make them into sociopaths, basically, into better killers. So that's something they were doing. And so this could be an extension of that. And also the idea that why wouldn't the CIA be interested in people who are just degenerates, who are dumb degenerates, who are also very popular? Because we mentioned this before, what a musician has access to is stunning. So if you're an agent, Houdini is a great example. Houdini was famous for this, for working for the government and doing just this. It's like, oh, you're going on tour. Where is he going on tour? Russia. Ooh, so, and guess who wants to meet the Rockstar? Who wants to meet Jim Morrison from The Doors? All these foreign dignitaries, all these members who love American cinema. Now, the Soviet Union is a bad example because they wouldn't have done that. But Bulgaria, places in South America where they can kind of get things started. And then also, if these people die, who gives a shit? That won't seem suspicious. They die of overdoses. Maybe they shot themselves in the head. Which is also something they would probably do. But also, they can disappear very fast. And they're very mentally malleable. So there's stuff like that. And that's the tentacles of the government. You can see already, it would make sense for them. And my policy is, if it makes sense for the CIA or the government to do something, they're probably already doing it. Why wouldn't they? They have the resources. Exactly. If we figured it out, they've certainly figured it out, because it's not our job to figure it out. Someone's getting paid 6 figures to think of stuff like this, and they probably did it 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And the nature of a CIA honeypot is not to get people arrested. I want people to realize that. So when people talk about honeypots over here, they think they're trying to get a bunch of people together to get them arrested. That's usually if it goes wrong. A honeypot that you've probably heard of, where people get rounded up in a sting, that's usually because someone fucked up and they got to end this. They got to dead this whole thing right now. What they want is people to recruit from. So their honeypots are people, and usually they won't be given missions. So here's an example I'll give you: Baked Alaska. Baked Alaska is just the type of personality a Fed would want. This guy is a complete glory hound, a degenerate. He's got no principles, no scruples. And I'm not saying he is, first of all. There's a lot of suspicions that he might be. I don't think he might or he might not be, but he seems to be the Teflon man. He always seems to get away with everything. And he's been in front of police many, many times and gotten away with it in many very strange ways.
He goes by Baked Alaska online, used to work at BuzzFeed, and last week live streamed himself inside the Capitol.
Yeah, we need to get our boy Donald J. Trump into office. Yeah, can we do that real quick?
Giannette has been on the extremist fringes for a while. December 11th, Giannette was being kicked out of a Scottsdale restaurant when he maced the security guard. Per usual, he was streaming from his now suspended DLive account.
We have the video right now, Scottsdale.
But it was saved and uploaded by the Phoenix New Times. Giannette was arrested for misdemeanor assault, disorderly conduct, and criminal trespassing. Booked, then released with conditions.
Violate no federal, state, or local criminal law. And in term 3, not leave the state of Arizona without written permission from the court.
Thursday, Giannette was supposed to be in Scottsdale court, but he was a no-show.
Does he know about today's hearing?
Yes, he does.
He's not here, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The judge shown his streams from the Capitol. He then chose to revoke Giannette's release, as well as issue a bond and warrant.
Until he comes in and posts $3,000, there's not to arrest in that amount.
If they come across him and the warrant's still active, they'll arrest him.
Nobody knows what Baked Alaska will do now.
But anyway, they would just keep him in their pockets. Like, here's a guy, you know, we touched him, we got him, we're keeping him in our pockets. Let's see what he does. Maybe we'll need him later. And maybe we won't need him at all, but he's going to be on our payroll. He's going to be our guy. And if we need a bit of information, we'll ring him up. But otherwise, we let him loose. And he's not going to be wearing a wire. He's not going to be going to dead drops and dropping shit in. But that's how things like this operate. And they just want people they can recruit from. So if you're thinking about a honeypot, don't think of it like, oh my God, I'm in a group that might get arrested. If they fuck up, you'll get arrested. But what they want is you to be on their payroll. And they got 100 different ways to make that seem attractive to you. So be aware of that. So when you hear honeypot, realize that honeypots don't usually operate in the way most people think. They operate like this would operate. And like, let's get a bunch of these musicians who have influence and let's get them with us. Let's get a bunch of blackmail on them. Because here's a story. I got a story for you from this book. There's this guy, this little group called Vito and the Freakers. So Vito and the Freakers doesn't get brought up that much, but they were foundational to the hippie movement and foundational to the Laurel Canyon area. And they get mentioned briefly in some of their autobiographies and stuff. But they were famous for a lot of these. Here's the story. Going back a bit further, most of these bands couldn't play their instruments. That's the secret. It's not that well kept a secret, but stuff like the Doors, a lot of these guys, the Monkees, the Byrds, they couldn't play instruments for shit. Their live acts were terrible. And all of it was done in studio. And there's books written by the studio musicians who actually wrote and performed a lot of these songs. And then they never, if you're a rock guy, you'll know about this. This won't be news to you, but for a lot of people, they don't. So these guys, they weren't even good musicians. They weren't even good at anything, but it was this system that was generating record sales. And you would go to these shows, and what people wanted to see, not necessarily these shitty bands, but they wanted to see like the hippie thing. So Vito and the Freakers were these hippies. This guy, very Manson-esque. Here's another thing, just a side thing. Charles Manson, he's the most notorious one for doing what he did. But there was like a couple dozen guys just like him with their harems of susceptible women using LSD, just getting in all forms of subversive degeneracy. And nothing really happened with them. But here's what he was known for. He was known for going to these shows, and he would bring his harem of freaky women with the bell bombs and the tie-dye, and they're living like hippies out in the desert. And people would come to see that. That's how they would get these shows popular. Like, come look at the freaks. Wow. Mm-hmm. And that's the funny thing, because I remember learning this years ago. Like, when you think of Woodstock, you think of hippies. You think of these iconic photos of hippies dancing. Maybe they're topless. But if you actually look at those photos again, look at the crowd all around them. They're just regular people. They're regular people in jeans and T-shirts. They look like guys now.
Yeah.
If you look at these Woodstock photos, there's a guy who looks probably just like you sitting in the crowd. But what brought them in was, oh my God, we're going to see all these like loose women, these freaky guys who look like Rob Zombie looks now. Rob Zombie looks like those guys. But and then so he would bring, that's how this movement got kicked off. But he got in trouble. The reason they don't want to bring this guy up is because he brought a lot of underage girls around. He brought a lot of 13-year-old girls around. And he basically prostituted them out to all these people. And this should not be shocking to you. You got stories of David Bowie fucking 15-year-olds. You got stories of, like, oh my God, you want to talk about Freddie Mercury? You think Freddie Mercury, your favorite lead singer of all time, you think he wasn't fucking 12-year-old boys in those bathhouses? Because as degenerate as the straight rock stars are, forget about it with the gay rock stars. They're still doing this. Back then, holy shit. You think like Mick Jagger, straight guy. I think there's a reason he doesn't want to write his autobiography. A lot of these guys, they don't want to sit down and write. They're going to have a lot of seedy characters pop up. They're going to have a lot of, oh yeah, I was here during this fucking child sex ring bust. Yeah, they got so, but that was what he got. This was a guy, another Charles Manson guy, who was parading around fucking prostituting 13-year-olds around. But that's how this stuff started generated. And as you can see, all the government we need to do is tap a couple of these guys on the shoulder, because this whole movement, even from strictly music standards, was all manufactured.
Yeah,
it was a couple managers. They're all hanging out in the same place. They knew how to get people in the venues, was parading this freak show around. This was as manufactured as anything. And they had other people performing their fucking music. And they're all fucking rich kids. Yeah. They're rich kids and with cheating on their test now, just like they were before.
Yeah. It's turf, top to bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but they capture the essence of why a performance matters, because like these ideas, now you get into like weird kind of cultural stuff. I don't want to get too deep into this, but this is what ancient plays were rites, not to entertain or instruct, but to like call forth power from society. This is what plays were. This is what these rituals are. A play is kind of just a ritual. It all comes from the same birth. So when you pollute the rituals, what power are you calling forth? That's a kind of a freaky occult way of looking at it. But that's why there's so much overlap with the occult. Like early on, guys like Jack Nicholson were palling around here. All the degenerate sex, all the drugs, playing with pentagrams, and you could argue that it's frivolous. Who cares? They're just playing around. But it matters, because you see how popular these people are. You see that they are at the center of your society right now. They became part of one of the biggest cultural movements in American history. Some might argue global history, because everyone knows what the hippies were. So to say that the stuff they were saying didn't matter, well, then why does any of it matter? If you think if you're incredibly popular, the things you say don't matter, that makes no fucking sense. Mm-hmm. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then you get into like occult stuff, because I was reading a lot of Jay Dyer in his Esoteric Hollywood book. He kind of talks about this. He talks about, the idea of occult magic is about combining opposites to erase division. It's about chaos. It's about the demiurge. It's about, creating this space of like, through hedonistic sex and fucked up sexual experiences, you're creating chaos, and chaos is at the root of what's occult. So, I mean, you can go down that road if you want. And like forgetting your origin, we're all the same, nothing matters, everything's transitory, all that stuff. That's what they're putting out there. What else here? I was going to ramble on this a bit. I kind of the one thing I wanted to kind of end on with this idea, because we can leave soon, but let me know what you think of this. We talk about the CIA doing all this stuff and creating these chaotic situations when things go wrong. But the CIA, if it were doing what we wanted them to do as a function of society, would we need the CIA? This is me almost defending the CIA. Like the CIA, because you look at the history of the CIA, and what they were on paper trying to do was to fight communism. Right. And there was communist subversion taking place. Now, we can argue with their methods. We could argue with that they were targeting citizens. We could do all that. But, in their minds, maybe they were saving America. And if the CIA is a counterpart to the KGB, and the KGB and the Soviet government was trying to spread communism internationally with weaponry, with warfare, with battles, and with subversion of nationalist groups. So it's like, it's going to hit America eventually. You need to defend. Was this a necessary defense? And do we only, if you want to run a functioning modern society, do you need something like the CIA, keeping an eye on things, keeping people under the payroll, keeping stability? Now goes against everything we've been talking about, but I just wanted to pose the question, just as a function of what this thing is supposed to be, to do the jobs, have the black sites, to do the dirty work that you don't want to do, but nonetheless kind of keeps the enemies at the gates. What do you think?
I mean, you kind of know where I land, and I don't think so. I don't think that you need it. I think if your primary concern is the Soviets or the communists or some state actor, I think given rights back to states and townships and just organizing security on that level is always going to be better and safer in the long run than having some kind of. To me, you mentioned the KGB. To me, the CIA is a copy of the KGB, and it has no place in a free Western society. The concept of this lawless organization with black sites that nobody has any control over, and we never hear about what they did until 50 years later, is patently absurd. And any excuse that's made for it, after the fact, is just them covering their asses. I don't think we ever needed it.
The claim was that the CIA, their main goal is the fictionalization of history. And they can do this. You can do this objectively. You can do this very, very bluntly by, editing digitized records, actually changing the records of history. Or you can do it by influencing the influencers now of rewriting history, the oral history that people tell, right? So the KGB does this. Everyone knows the KGB and the USSR was notorious for editing people out of photos, of changing events, of lying. The fact of the matter is every government does that. China's government does it. American, Canadian government does it. They do it just like the mob, just like the criminals. They will say they think they have a code. They will tell you up and down that they have all these lines they won't cross until they have to cross them. But then again, the reason they have that place is that we're the ones who can tell what lines to cross and when. That's what they'll tell you. But what they're trying to do is reinvent history. So you can imagine if you're trying to control history, why could you not have the money and the pressure put on the people who are culturally relevant, of not just rock stars, authors? We know for a fact that the CIA has authors and newspaper people and reporters on their payroll. So did the KGB. That was the information war they were waging during the Cold War. So why not rock stars? They would be way easier to get on your side than reporters. As dumb as most reporters and journalists are, remember that. Look at who else you got, like Jack White from the White Stripes. He's fucking stupid. He just wears hats he thinks smart guys wear. These are the easiest guys in the world, and they have the most power. Like, the very existence of a rock star seems like a psyop. How fucking crazy is it that we have rock stars at all? How fucking insane is it that someone like Taylor Swift has the influence that she has and is completely dumb? And is so separate from society she couldn't engage with people without being told by her manager what to do anyway.
Yeah, and we didn't really have rock stars prior to Laurel Canyon anyways. The closest thing would be
jazz guy, like even someone like Louis Armstrong was but we see him as a rock star now, but even back then there was a lower ceiling on what a musician could be culturally, I think.
Yeah. And these people were not held up like a beacon on a hill. That everybody from coast to coast had to listen to them. They weren't. They might have been household names, but they were household names in the same. You treat them like a brand of rice or something. You know what I mean? Like it's not the same thing as with the way that the newer generation treated those musicians. Was this is somebody that I'm really listening to their message. I'm really trying to model my life and my decisions after them, which is pure propaganda.
Here's an angle. Use the word propaganda. I like that. We'll get to this in the next episode because I do need to get going now. But propaganda, the definition I like of propaganda, because a lot of people don't have an accurate definition. It is something that triggers action. It's not just brainwashing. It's not just an ideology that's repeated to you and you believe it. It's almost the opposite. It's something that triggers a reaction and an actual physical action that you do something. right? That's how you can measure good propaganda. So if you think about rock stars and the most famous musicians in the world, like these jazz musicians that would tour Europe, like Louis Armstrong and even Billie Holiday, someone like that, they would lead degenerate lifestyles. But with like the Monkees, and maybe it started with the Beatles, where it was way more consumerist, and the Beatles were superstars. So was Bob Dylan. But the idea of, now I'm going to dress like them. Now I'm going to wear the hippie uniform. Now I'm going to buy all the shirts. There's an avalanche. There's a snowballing capitalist angle to it, where now more and more increasingly you're becoming part of a cult. And I use the cult very loosely, but like, you have your uniform, you have your beliefs, and you have more devotion to the rock star themselves. And I think it might have been like a Jim Morrison type character. So every single one of these people is like Charles Manson. Like, how is fucking Kurt Cobain any different? Like, I think it got to him eventually, because maybe he realized he had too much power, or maybe he was killed by Courtney Love. I don't know. But some people, they realize how insane it is to have this much power and influence, and that even somewhat sarcastically, you have people like Slipknot. They call their fans maggots, and they're part of a club. And there's the Kiss Army. Like, there's bands, so many bands where they really lean into it. It's like, yes, if you pay me money and I'll send you a special piece of merchandise, and now you're part of our army. And at that point, it almost becomes like a hyper reality where people don't really. So maybe this is more of a truer form, where I think in the hippie era, you really saw, this is why it seems like a psyop to me. You really saw people taking rock stars really, really seriously, too seriously, and becoming part of the group, and not being a spectator, but actually becoming an active participant. That's what the hippie movement, that's why people got into the hippie movement, because they're buying in on a deeper level, and then you could influence them